With the release of Guilty Gear Strive, the conversation of simplifying fighting games has come up again. Generally speaking, the two sides of the debate are pretty much for and against the simplification of fighting games for a variety of reasons. Ironically enough, the conversation itself is so complex that it'd be impossible for me to accurately represent and summarize each of these arguments, so let me say this. Personally, I believe that each opinion has their own merits and reasonings, but chaos is the only thing that people seem to understand, so let me throw in my own opinion too. I would currently identify myself as a casual fighting game player, but hopefully beyond the skill level of a beginner. However, in 2018, I actually was a beginner when it came to fighting games, and even made my start from BBTAG, or BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, a game that was heavily criticized for being a simplified fighting game. While it might not be the most accurate representation, I'd like to share a bit of my story as a casual beginner whose first real fighting game was BBTAG, and what that experience taught me. So first off, let me say that BBTAG actually wasn't my first fighting game ever. I knew about the big names like Street Fighter and Tekken, had played Smash with my friends, and actually bought and played Pokken and Under Night In-Birth. But even though I owned these games, I never really got invested in them. I never had that urge to improve beyond simple button mashing. And that isn't to say that these are bad games, I just wasn't interested for some reason. So with those experiences and a few years, BBTAG was announced at EVO 2017. And my reaction? Nowhere to be seen. I didn't even know what EVO was at that point. It wasn't until about 4 months after the announcement when a friend told me that a Persona 4 fighting game existed, and I just happened to stumble across BBTAG in that Google search. And fresh out of Persona 4, I was pretty excited, especially since I didn't have a PlayStation for the arena games, and I saw some familiar faces from Under Night. Then, with my friends participating in open betas that I had missed out on, I was determined to keep an eye on the game at that point. So, after release, I bought the game as soon as I could, and I started playing. I did a bit of the tutorial in BBTAG and poked around with a few characters for about an hour or so before jumping online to play some matches. And man, I had the time of my life. Day after day, I made a habit of playing BBTAG. Then eventually I started labbing and looking out for guides and resources. Then somehow I became a part of a small BBTAG community, which by some crazy sequence of events resulted in me joining small tournaments and clocking in hundreds of hours in the game. So with that said, what did I learn from this simplified fighting game? Basically, I feel like there's two things a fighting game has to do to turn a person into a player. Pull them in so they buy the game, then keep them in so they play the game. And from my early fighting game experience, there were games that did fail to pull. Street Fighter and Tekken were two names that I knew of, but were never really interesting enough for me to buy them. On the other hand, Smash, Pokken, Under Night, and BBTAG were games that I actually owned. Smash pulled me in with its brand recognition, Pokken pulled me in with brand recognition again, Under Night pulled me in from my friends' recommendations, and BBTAG pulled me in from brand recognition again. I wonder if there's a bit of a pattern here. But either way, in the end, anything can be a valid pull. After all, people show their personal interest with their wallet, and you can even go as far as to say that it's the marketing team's job to pull you in, not the game developers. So, what kept me in the game? Simply put, I had fun. But it's not sufficient to say, oh, the game gets fun 30 hours in. Showing me that the game is fun from the start is what convinces me that this is a good use of my time and not just a refund. Having fun at a beginner and low level is the defining factor for if a game sticks with someone, and this applies for any game, just replace low skill with low hours. And that just makes sense in the end, you know? Why would you play a game if it's not fun? But how you make a fighting game fun at a low level is where the arguments start. People who want simpler fighting games would say that minimal mechanics and less intensive inputs lets you get to the meat of the game where the fun really begins. But I wasn't invested in Pokken, even with its simple mechanics and lenient inputs. People who want more complex fighting games might say that keeping the depth and complexity high is what's most important, especially since it doesn't affect beginners who are playing low-level games anyways. But I wasn't invested in Under Night because it felt too abstract and difficult to me, even with an in-depth tutorial and extraordinarily helpful and patient friends. And if you stop this video right now, don't, you might think that there's a perfect in-between, and to that I say yes and no. While there are many sides and arguments to simplicity in fighting games, I'd like to present my own opinion, a sort of fusion of both. The main reason I call BBTAG my first fighting game is because it was the first fighting game I got invested in, the first one that really made me want to deep dive into its mechanics and explore what the game could offer. So what did it do? I'd say that BBTAG made mashing fun. It felt good to be bad at the game. All I had for the longest time, since I walked out of BBTAG's tutorial, was an auto combo and an ender. But that's fine, I thought it was fun. As a matter of fact, I'd say that fun at a low level is feeling like you did something cool, even if you didn't. Between big, hard-hitting visuals, cinematic supers, and even a dedicated cinematic for the universal overhead, it felt good to do even the most basic things. And while calling BBTAG a complex game is bound to start its own set of arguments, I felt like I was only limited by my creativity and not so much the game itself. And it's safe to say that even after hundreds of hours, I couldn't compete with the best, and that's fine, because that's not my goal. It never was. So, my opinion on simplifying fighting games is the exact opposite of what you'd hear from some fighting game developers. I think the skill floor should be as low as possible and the skill ceiling should be as high as possible. In other words, I want to widen the gap between casual and competitive, not close it. And the reason for that is simple. The player themselves defines how they want to play. You can't force a casual player to want to be the best. Some people just want to play the game to just chill out with friends or waste time. At the same time, you can't hold back a competitive player to have equal footing with casual players. That would quite literally be punishing them for putting more time into the game. And frankly, this won't cause a split in the community because there already is one. After all, this entire debate of simplification is seen from two sides. A simple and casual experience versus a complex and competitive one. And if a casual player wanted to transition to a more competitive stance, like I sort of did, that's their decision with the community. All they have to do is talk with others. The game has little impact on this. There's no magic switch that turns the game from casual mode to competitive mode. Wait. But the main takeaway here is that fighting games should be fun. They should be fun at the lowest level, where mashing and minimal knowledge still gives you a massive sense of satisfaction, and they should be fun at the highest level, where people who put the most time and effort into the game are rewarded with a game that promotes creativity, expression, and individuality. But it's just as important to mention the conditions outside the game too. Good netcode makes the entire game feel reliable and responsive, so you can actually play the game instead of fighting the game itself. Developer support shows players that there's confidence in the longevity of the game and its community. It gives the players a reason to keep playing, and good matchmaking highlights the fun of being at your current skill level. It's just less fun to be stuck with a one-sided match in either direction. So, funny enough, I think that these are the things that killed BBTAG, not the gameplay itself, or at least the PC scene. The netcode was dog shit, the devs abandoned the game, and any semblance of matchmaking in ranked mode was dead on arrival. You were left to find your own matches using this godforsaken color system in the lobbies. So I'd say, before making a fighting game simple, make it fun. Then after the game is fun, you add rollback. Literally just give me rollback and I'll play anything, like, honestly. But jokes aside, don't require players to lab and research to at least feel successful at a basic level, but don't stifle player growth to appeal to a group that isn't interested in growing at all. I want players to have a solid floor to stand on and plenty of room to grow. But either way, opinions are still just opinions, and it's important to respect both people and the games that they want to play. After all, despite how much you might dislike a game, it could very well be someone's first serious fighting game. Alternatively, that game could have rollback netcode and instantly be godlike. Like, seriously, I'm in no position to say anything about Strive, but it has rollback, so it has to be good by default. Wait, actually, aren't the lobbies pretty...